The ministry of the chapel has much to celebrate as we continue to grow and form. But who we are today rests on the larger foundation of God's enduring faithfulness. Reflecting on history, we can carefully trace his provision and direction through a legacy spanning decades of change, obedience, and dedication. The story of the chapel is rooted in the faithfulness of God and the faithful obedience of a few. God moved in the heart of founding pastor James Andrews to raise up and lead a new expression of the church, launching its first service on January 22, 1961. Even as it grew, this community was known by their love.
Reverend Andrews, he lived across almost from Park School on Harlem Road, and one day when he was home, he had a heart to come back to Buffalo. He told me that he was looking out the window and saw the school and thought, why not plant the church there?
Did that for about a year in the Park School before getting some property on North Forest Road.
And they just built a little building with a little stage.
I just love thinking about that. The small beginnings of a group of faithful people who had a dream about a different kind of church.
When I think of Pastor Andrews and who he was, that's what determined what he did. I think about the fact that this was a man who had such great ability to follow through on what the Lord placed on his heart. That legacy is absolutely incredible.
As God opened up avenues for sharing the gospel, he also generously provided through his people. He allowed the North Forest facility to expand through several phases of growth and development in order to accommodate a growing community of faith. The people of the chapel stood together, giving time, talents, and resources, creating unique opportunities to present the truth of Jesus.
We had a huge vacation Bible school that was an outreach to so many families, and sometimes because of the children, families started attending the chapel.
We bring them in by the busloads. This year we've had 14 bus routes.
I really didn't come into saving faith until later in my life, but Vacation Bible School was the seeds of that. I think God used that as a means to start to reveal himself to me in a childlike manner. And also it was the first exposure to the local church, what it meant to be a part of a loving family of people that cared not just for children, but for one another.
One of the highlights of the year for many, many years was the Living Singing Christmas Tree. It was one of the first in the nation, and it drew thousands of people to come on campus. And I have heard personally, and the church has heard, a number of testimonies of people who first, again, were confronted with the claims of Christ as a result of their attendance at the Living Singing Christmas Tree.
In this season of abundance, it seemed he was preparing this church family to trust his faithfulness in the face of a much more difficult season.
I remember hearing the news of Pastor Andrews' illness and pancreatic cancer. It hit us all hard because this was our leader.
We don't ask for wealth. We're not even asking for health. We're asking for more of you. More about Jesus.
Every seat inside the chapel today was taken. Thousands came for the memorial service of Reverend Andrews.
People, one after another, would say to me, well, that pastor was such a dynamic person. When are we selling the chapel? And my eyes popped out of my head. What do you mean, when are we selling the chapel? And they said, well, he was the guy. He was the chapel. And it gave me a wonderful opportunity to say some of my business colleagues, what are you talking about? The chapel is the Lord's. And I said, I'm kind of thinking God has something else in mind.
What an incredible legacy that he has left.
Pastor Al comes and provides such stability in a season of uncertainty. He understood what his task was because he was also helping us to see and experience God healing the wounds while also readying us to march forward on a mission.
Buffalo, New York is a place where in the past, pastors knew each other, but they didn't work together. There wasn't a lot of unity. All of that has changed really under Pastor Jerry.
And Pastor Jerry really helped disciple me and actually helped give a vision for what God was doing in my heart. I had been wrestling with a call to vocational ministry for some time.
Through the growth of the chapel, which was happening quickly, it became very obvious that the confines of the few acres we had on 895 needed to expand.
We thank God that He's brought us, our family, and He's wed our hearts with the chapel family. And now we stand here at this window of opportunity.
Wow. Did I actually sound like that?
Just behind me is the acreage that we're looking at, and you know as well as I do that God's done a miracle in that. By not only are we purchasing part of that, but the other half, God saw fit to move a man's heart to give it to us. So I would just encourage you that we as a church need to walk with unified courage as we walk with God through this process on the road to the chapel at Cross Point.
As the chapel remained committed to gospel saturation, God continued to refine our mission and vision, leading us to more actively engage with partnerships and church plants.
When the vision of every man, woman, and child permeated everything that we did at the chapel, it caused us to ask questions about the kingdom of God. And so for the first time in the history of the chapel, and at that time that was like 46 years, we decided, and as a church, we launched our first church plant, the chapel at Elmwood.
God just did an amazing thing. Ended up having 7 theaters in that space, 1 for the adults and then 6 for kids. And so it was exciting.
In the following years, God led us further to launch not 1, but 2 additional campuses, allowing us to begin coming alongside the communities of Lockport and Cheektowaga and helping to build up a greater gospel presence.
So in addition to becoming one church on 3 campuses, we started planting churches because the vision compelled us to do that. And we planted probably somewhere in the neighborhood, or partnered to plant, around 25 churches, maybe, and that's continuing to grow. But you know, at this point in our ministry life, we have actually planted churches, and there are people that are worshiping in those churches that represent twice as many people than there were at the chapel when I arrived 15 years ago. So we've got twice as many worshipers in churches we've planted or partnered to plant. That's astounding in terms of kingdom impact. And I thank God that that's a legacy that's being written in our church even today.
So being connected or being a part of the legacy of the chapel just excites me because it serves as an encouragement to who I am as a follower of Christ. And it has given me the confidence to know that if I just put my yes on the table and I trust God, that He can do so many bigger things, and we as individuals can influence so many bigger things. And so when I think of the legacy of Pastor Andrews, having the courage to walk in obedience, to start something that God placed in his heart, it just is an encouragement on how good and how great God can be when you're connected to something that is biblically driven and aligned with the call that God has for your life.
For well over half a century, it is incredible to consider our history and trace God's hand at work. With gratitude and humility, we recognize the legacy of generosity and love laid before us, planting seeds of truth and obedience so that we might continue to sow into future generations. We know God is still shaping the ministry of the chapel, and the story He is telling through this local church is nowhere near complete. We appreciate the decades of his faithfulness preceding this present season to remind ourselves of the legacy on which we stand. God's sovereignty and direction has led us. His provision and his timing never fails. Together, we celebrate this truth, marveling at all God has done and believing in all he will continue to do.